What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to the channel, and today we're going to be doing my first impressions of the camera I'm shooting on right now, which is the Sony ZV-E1. I'm going to talk about some of the good, some of the bad, and some of the okay. So yeah. Alright guys, so let's talk about the elephant in the room, which is the 12 megapixel sensor that this camera shares with the FX30 and the Sony A7S III. Image quality wise, you are going to get the same image quality that you're going to get out of both of those cameras. I've used all three now. Image quality wise, you put them all together, you're not going to be able to tell the difference. You can record pretty much in all the same codecs outside of DCI 4K, which is in the FX3 and the Sony A7S III. You cannot record RAW externally with this camera. You only have one SD card with this camera versus the other have two SD cards or slots or two CF Express type A or B. I'm not sure. I don't use them, so I don't really pay that much attention. But you don't have that option with this camera. So that's really the only comparison I'm going to do between this camera and those other two. Outside of that, you know, image quality wise, you're getting the same thing. Dynamic range, 10-bit color, S-Log3, S-Cinetone, all that stuff, you're getting that within this camera. Alright guys, so let's talk about some of the pros. First pro is price to performance. With this camera, you are going to get pretty much the same performance that you're going to get out of the beloved Sony FX30. Now there are a few caveats. You don't have a fan like the FX3, so you have to worry about overheating. You can't shoot DCI 4K, you can't record RAW externally, but for the most part, for most people, you're going to get the same exact performance, the same exact image quality for $2,000 less. I paid less than $2,000 for this camera. Right now the FX3 goes for about $3,600-$3,700 brand new. On the used market, I've seen anywhere from $3,000 to $3,400, not $34,000. That would be crazy. So you're saving yourself quite a bit of money for, you know, 95% of the performance that you're getting out of the FX3. Again, there's a few caveats. If those are things that you need, obviously, then you're going to have to look at the FX3 over this guy. But for most people, you know, this gets you pretty much all the way there. All right, so let's go to pro number 2, ladies and gentlemen, and that is no overheating thus far. Now, I haven't had this camera for a super long time, but I haven't had anything close to overheating on this thing yet. I haven't had the warning come up, haven't had anything, you know, any kind of warning signs that the thing's gonna overheat. Hasn't shut off on me. Now, that's not to say it hasn't gotten warm, but again, it has not come close to overheating at this point. Now, I know that is something that's well documented with this camera, and it does have issues overheating, and you know, time will tell. But you know, I've used this thing a lot since I've had it. You know, it's been almost my main shooter since I got it. You know, I've used this thing for these videos, I've used it for client work, I've used it for podcasts, and you know, it definitely punches well above its weight class. So, you know, again, so far, no overheating. Alright guys, so let's talk about another thing that I like about this camera. And it's something I wasn't sure about till I actually got it in my hands, and it's the build quality. You know, it's definitely small. That's why I had to put a cage on it. So that's definitely something I had to do. It's definitely a little bit smaller, so I have a cage on it to kind of you know give it a little more size, a little bit more weight. But overall, the build quality is good. You know, it's not as good as, you know, the FX3 obviously, or any of the other, you know, prosumer level cameras that Sony has. But all the reviews I saw online, it may seem like this thing was, you know, a cheap piece of plastic, and you know, it is made mostly out of plastic, but you know, it still feels good in the hand. It still, you know, looks pretty premium. You know, it doesn't look like a super cheap camera that if you just drop it from a 1-foot fall, it's going to break. So I've been pleasantly surprised by the build quality of this camera. Alright, so let's talk about some negatives for this camera. Overall, there's not a lot that, you know, I can point to where I say, oh man, I really hate this. And if I have to point out one thing, there's a few things I can nitpick about, but if I have to point out one thing that I really don't like this camera doesn't have is it does not have this front dial on the grip. I use that on all my other cameras so much that I find myself trying to do that a few times, and I'll actually hit this zoom rocker button instead. I'm like, oh yeah, there's no dial there. So that part sucks. I wish there was at least just a small little dial, something. I know, you gotta keep costs down, you gotta keep it small, but man, I would appreciate it a little dial. I mean, you can change everything from the screen here, you can do all that, but I prefer the dials, to be honest. It's nice to be able to change all my settings. I got used to that with Canon, and it's nice Sony's finally starting to do the same thing, but I really would appreciate that dial. So that's one. If I'm nitpicking, even though I don't use it, the micro HDMI, that's crap. They should at the very least give a mini HDMI. Micro is trash, so that part kind of sucks. Yeah, I haven't experienced overheating, anything like that. Yeah, overall, there's not a lot right now for me to nitpick, as I use this. Oh yeah, and then having only one SD card slot. Again, I know it's a cheaper camera. You gotta cut corners in certain places. I wish that was not one of the places they cut it, but yeah. So again, like I said, overall, not a whole lot to nitpick about. It's a really good camera, and I've been enjoying my time with this camera. I'm looking forward to using it more and more, to find out, more of its strengths, more of its weaknesses, things I like, things I don't like. So anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. See you guys at the next one.